I'm bored. I feel like shit. Been down with COVID for a few days. So, I thought I'd read some Squadron 42 news for those who don't like to read or don't have time. Do my best for you. See where it goes. Typically get these reports from CIG once a month or something like that. And we get plenty of content creators out there reading them and giving their takes on it. I don't need you to give you my take. I just am going to read it so you don't have to. Welcome to November December Squadron 42 Development Report. Enclosed, you will find details on the latest progress made across the campaign, including updates to security behaviors, cinematics, and varying forms of combat. Thank you for the continued support of Squadron 42. Sincerely, CIG Communications. AI content for Squadron 42. AI content focused on the deck crew and security AI behaviors. The deck crew activity brings life and movement to hangars and landing pads, with each character being assigned a specialized role, including ordnance, responsible for the ship's weapons and rearmament, mechanics, in charge of repairs and maintenance, air traffic controllers, assigns landing zones to inbound crafts, and more. The next step is to build on the basic functionality to make the whole crew work together to restore full functionality to damaged ships and vehicles. The security behavior controls player and NPC access to specific areas, with the team investigating how to use the reputation system to determine where characters are allowed to go. For example, guards can now can check the criminality, rank, and affinity of those who approach and act accordingly, whether they deny or allow access or salute a character of higher rank. The first implementation is a military guard, but this activity will be used for bouncers and mall cops in the future after additional mocap has been processed. We got mall cops coming. AI features. The past couple of months saw AI features focus on improving human combat. This involved adjusting the perception systems to support NPCs perceiving dead or incapacitated bodies and implementing a behavior so they react as intended. If not already in combat, the first AI to find the body will go and check on them and then trigger investigative behaviors to search for the perpetrator. In the future, some incapacitated bodies will be able to be revived, healed, or released from captivity by an appropriate agent. Just bear with me. I'm having a hard time. Promise I can read. Just don't feel well. In support of the weapons training behavior, which includes using firing range simulators, the AI needs to be able to target natural. The AI needs to be able to target neutral, non-agent targets tagged for a particular lane so that different agents can use simulators at the same time. This involved updating the observable and perception component to make them more data-driven and compatible with firing ranges. Man, I am out of it today. This COVID gets to you. It fucking melts your mind too. These changes also make it easier to support other targetable objects in the future, such as objects that agents might want to sabotage or destroy to further the gameplay. For Vandal Combat, a section of gameplay was completed where enemy perception is reduced when searching for players. Interesting. This led to discussion of how to implement low visibility and other sense reduction across the board. They then prototyped the initial implementation for the specific gameplay use, which will also be used as a springboard for fully developing the feature. Vandal perception and investigation progressed as well. 2. On the animation side, the team continued work with mocap for cowering and surrendering animations, hit reactions from different stances, the speed protocol of animations for dead body reactions, and Vandal attack and search animations. A lot of data requires polish and integration to existing animations, with particular care being made to check the animation's start and end in poses consistent with the most common use cases so that blending is as smooth as possible. Animation. Towards the end of the year, animation worked on Vandal and human combat and made improvements to human AI locomotion. The facial team continued with quality passes on animations affected by improvements to the character head geometry, while the mocap team supported by a story shoot and currently solving that gathered data. Gameplay story worked alongside level design to implement and correct various story scenes that play throughout gameplay. Art characters. The Squadron 42 character art team focused on completing the Navy faction, which involved updating and finalizing major characters and outfits. The Navy makes up around half of all characters in the campaign, with the majority being hero tier characters, so it will be a significant milestone when complete. Cinematics. For the cinematics team, the end of the year involved continuing larger staging tasks and progressing with scenes started at the beginning of quarter 4. For the opening chapter, the engine team delivered a cinematic-specific ship object container for use with VFX. The required effects are packaged into the ship itself, so aren't as demanding on performance, allowing several to be added to a scene without affecting performance. The ships don't have any features or mechanics linked to them, so they can be fired on or destroyed without creating issues elsewhere. An escape pod was reworked to give better view outside while work progressed on a scene involving a tram. Trams and escape pods. The team improved the way conversations are hinted at, then triggered, creating a speech bubble style icon to show players important characters they can talk to in more populated areas. As players can interact with most crew members, this enables them to find key characters and conversations without approaching every NPC. They're currently deciding how the display will be oriented and how to lead players to the ideal approach direction for specific characters. Engine. During the last 2 months of 2021, the physics team worked on a variety of topics. Quantum grids were changed to use one per solar system. They also received support for box queries. Grid overlap checks were unified for planets and other entities, and grid transitions were improved to allow a natural transition into grids that aren't a direct parent-child of the current grid to transition from. Moreover, physics constraints received support for limiting the gravity tilt angle, and work began to support structural joints on CGAs. Also, a quantum step function for spaceships was implemented, and entities tied to a rope are no longer unnecessarily woken up when the rope becomes slack. For optimizations, physics post-step notifications and networked rigids are now processed in parallel. Similarly, vehicle hip processing was moved to allow parallelization. Cross-grid collision detection was optimized to avoid expensive geometry checks as much as possible, and asteroid fields now use the faster hash function and cache physics proxies of their occupants to prevent redundant component lookups. Lastly, physics events are now more efficiently deleted after being processed. On the renderer, further work was done on the transition to Gen 12. Progress included improvements to instance buffers, indirections on GPU removed, support for offset-based buffer binding, support for different buffer layouts, after they'd previously been optimized in October. Furthermore, shadow support for lightweight render nodes was added. Lightweight render node decals were also ported to Gen 12, and projected decals were fixed. A G-buffer copy pass was implemented. Unnecessary GPU updates were fixed, and shader stage visibility was improved to compile and bind fewer stages. Render passes are now always submitted via render graph and support a fallback pass in case any required PSO isn't compiled. Fog volumes and skybox rendering were ported, clip volume rendering migrated, render proxy shadow enabled, and color grading refactored for Gen 12. Lastly, the sorting of PSOs was tweaked, resulting in significantly fewer API calls during rendering. Regarding atmosphere and cloud rendering, R&D on reprojection of frame data without the need for motion vectors was completed, but didn't yet yield satisfactory results. Therefore, the implementation will stick with the current reprojection scheme for the time being. To improve image quality nonetheless, Research started on new noise reduction of the original Raymarch results that are fed into the filter chain to produce final full resolution images. Results look promising and will hopefully be shared in the coming PU release. Additionally, irradiance computation for atmospheric lighting was improved. It now better integrates ground albedo and reflected sunlight. Albedo, I don't know what I'm saying there. Loading and fade out of the ground albedo was also improved, which is important for large objects in high orbit. In general, code was unified in various areas and prepared for integration upstream into the main development branch as preparation for the coming transition of all atmosphere and cloud render code to Gen 12. On the core engine side, the team submitted the first draft of entity-centric component update scheduling, which is already showing promising performance results. The scheduler now also catches and reports invalid dependencies and provides options for various update processing scenarios, client, server only, etc. The commonly used performance stats r_display info are being reworked. Page heap, our heap to track memory corruptions, now supports team filters now supports dev team filters so issues can be more easily assigned to the owners of related code. Viz area calling received additional improvements and now better handles invalid shapes. Additionally, care was taken to ensure the engine's exception is correctly invoked in case of stat corrections reported by specially prepared game binaries, typically for debugging certain issues during PTU. The localization manager loading code was optimized, and the engine now collects GPU timings as part of its profiler telemetry data that can be consumed for analysis by the external profiling tool. Lastly, investigations regarding EASTL integration continued. The team also looked into compile time optimizations. Some of the changes consist of removal of unnecessary headers, including common header files used through the project, cleanup of platform headers, removal of various boost cruft, and replacement of expensive unnecessary macros, re-implementation of a recursive helper template by an equivalent context PR, and the externalization of huge if-else chains. Moreover, compile times were reanalyzed via Clang, and code was finally redistributed to Uber files accordingly. The Squadron 42 feature team continued developing the in-game character customizer, improving support for head selection and hair, and supporting the design team with transition animations and the user interface. They undertook R&D on the conversation inner thought, primarily on how it appears when players approach an NPC, and whether there are any restrictions on where it triggers from. They also optimized some cinematic-heavy scenes, including simplifying ways to create lightweight vehicles, improving multi-threaded sequence batch, updating, and checking they're not loading more than necessary. Gameplay story. Gameplay story began November, updating poses to maintain and polish several scenes. They then received a significant amount of mocap that was shot at the end of October, which allowed them to make a number of anticipated updates to several scenes across various chapters. I feel so nasally. I'm so sorry if my voice sounds like shit. Excuse me, that is horrible. They also overhauled one of the walk and talk sections in Chapter 5 to give them greater control of the animation. This took a lot of work, but helped the chapter progress well. They also took on 2 scenes in Chapter 14 that take place in a busy environment. They started their pass prototyping the other animation and activities going on around the scenes themselves. A new and improved turret metric was devised, allowing the team to confidently update scenes featuring turrets, and they began implementing new audio and face and body animations into random 2 NPC scenes. It's been surprising to see how much final audio improves a scene, and it's great that our NPC characters can now reply to the cast and characters. Gameplay story. Graphics and VFX programming. The graphics team completed a significant amount of work on shaders and materials towards the end of last year, with one of the main focuses being updating volumetric water lighting so it works in a similar way to volumetric fog model. There were also several bug fixes for water volumes in general. The hair shader also received attention due to the updates to the hair clip volume interaction and efforts to prevent artists from having to rework assets through emulating the old visuals with the latest shading model. They completed the shader conversions from the old DX9 style too. Specifically for Squadron 42, the team supported cinematics by optimizing letterbox rendering and cutscenes, investigating issues with camera cut brightness, and looking into image stabilization for offline rendering. For Gen 12, the team implemented a fallback rendering system called Pass Group Fallbacks for use when the shaders are compiling. For Vulkan, they continued with GPU marker refactor, adding API versioning, and fixing issues with arrays of resources on Vulkan. Development of the fire hazard feature continued, with the VFX programming team moving heat and temperature to the physics proxy, working on IR emissions, and fixing various bugs with the temperature component and look at debug camera. Numerous updates were made to particles, including new controls for the mesh particle offset position and min-max pixels, a new option to pick attached zones of particle entities, and particle texture aspect ratio support. There are also bug fixes for flashing black particles. Interesting. There are also bug fixes for flashing black particles, emitter balance calculations, entity placement on planet OCs, and shock diamonds. Interesting. Finally, a number of performance improvements and optimizations were made to emitter memory consumption, material glow lock contention from entity effects, and gas cloud zone contention on destruction and impact MFX. Level design. The Space Dogfight team worked on flight components for chapters that focus on points of interest, expanding some of the investigative gameplay in the game's early chapters. They also worked alongside the other feature teams to refine turret gameplay. The FPS team focused on getting FPS components playing through without blockers and implementing the additional features delivered in the last quarter of 2021. The social design team continued with the significant task of implementing all in-game scenes, which will be the case for many months to come. Many months to come. Sounds fun. Narrative. The narrative team spent the bulk of the past few months dividing their time between content planning, working continued on tracking all line requests in preparation for capture later in the year. They also began working alongside the dev teams to review and discuss levels, including the AI team, to plan behaviors and archetypes. The writers will start building out scripts and creating placeholder audio in the new year. 2022. It's going to bring some shit. Q&A. Cinematics continue to rely on Q&A for regular chapter testing, with a work throughout the last 2 months focusing on track view testing and ironing out as many of the tool defects when rendering scenes. They also continue to test and review scenes to ensure quality doesn't diminish as development continues. With the AI team splitting to cover more Squadron 42 development, the Frankfurt-based QA team moved to support them and is currently hiring to help with the increased workload. The team will still focus on behavior testing, but will be expanding into level checks alongside Q&A in the UK. Q&A in the UK. Tech animation. To close out the year, Tech animation team set a mandate to finish updating or upgrading on all head assets to the new pipeline in preparation for the full DNA system refactor. This is a long-standing initiative that will hopefully conclude in early 2022. Maybe we'll see the new DNA, see new head types, be able to do better things, make ourselves look prettier. Because that needs some prettying up. To get us there, we need to recreate every single head asset in the game and check if it's still working as we intended. All hands are on deck for this one, with the whole team pushing to reach the finish line. Tech animation. Alongside this, the team began cleaning up the animation databases, which involved triaging several hundred old animation assets, references from databases. Tech animation also continued to support the various feature teams with embedded staff. UI. Towards the end of the year, The UI feature and tech team addressed various UI related bugs, crashes, and performance issues. Progress was made on the core tech and feature set of the new star map. That's good news. Progress was made on the core tech and feature set of the new star map. New star map, can't wait. For example, they added display controls to modify relative distance, orientation, and scale, and the ability to frame selected objects appropriately. Now give us a search function. Let us type it in. Little fingers on the keyboard, like that, and then we can look shit up. UI Tech continued work on the core technology for hacking, adding the ability to select and edit text in the UI. The new building blocks editor entered pre-production towards the end of the year, which will make working on UIs more efficient and developer friendly. Additionally, more building blocks features were added. VFX. VFX began working on a vertical slice section of a key outdoor location. Squadron 42 vertical slice incoming? Perhaps. We've heard this before, though, so we'll see. The collaboration with the cinematics teams also continued, with additions and refinements made to the epic battle scene mentioned in the previous report. They also decided to revisit some weapon effects requiring a visual update. And that is your Squadron 42 update for, what date they send this? January 19th, 2022, the day I caught COVID. And now I read to you the notes. I hope you'd enjoyed it. I hoped you did enjoyed it when I talked it to you. Just turn this thing on, sit back and listen to it, and hopefully you'll get some information out of it, as I did. I'm going to clip this, shorten it, post it. This was a live reading. Hope you enjoyed it. Come watch the stream sometime. I may be on for the next couple days while I remain COVID positive. I'm going to try to burn this shit out of my body with Long Island iced teas and whatever the fuck else I can get in my body in order to help me feel a little less Death of a Space Lamb.